Have you ever looked at two people who clearly love each other and wondered why they still keep hurting one another? Maybe they don't scream, they don't cheat, they don't even fight that often, but somehow every conversation leaves them feeling a little more distant. Every misunderstanding becomes another brick in an invisible wall. And over time, they begin asking themselves a heartbreaking question: what happened to us? The surprising answer isn't always a lack of love. In many cases, it's something far less obvious. Something quietly shaping the way both people think, feel, and react without either of them realizing it. Psychologists call it attachment. And once you understand how attachment works, you'll start noticing a relationship trap that countless couples fall into without ever seeing it. A trap that slowly pulls two loving people apart, not because they're wrong for each other, but because their nervous systems are trying to protect them in completely different ways. If you've ever felt like you're always chasing reassurance or constantly needing space after emotional conversations, stay with me. Because by the end of this video, you may recognize patterns that have been hiding in plain sight, and that awareness alone can completely change the way you see your relationships. Most of us grow up believing that relationships are simple. You find the right person, you communicate well, you compromise, and everything works out. But real life is rarely that straightforward. Two people can have incredible chemistry, shared values, and genuine love for each other, yet still find themselves stuck in the exact same painful arguments over and over again. Imagine this. Sarah texts her boyfriend Mark, asking if everything is okay because he seemed distant during dinner. Mark reads the message, sighs, and decides he'll answer later after he has time to think. An hour passes, then two. Sarah notices there's still no reply. Her mind starts filling in the blanks. Maybe he's upset. Maybe I said something wrong. Maybe he's losing interest. By the time Mark finally responds with "Sorry, I was just busy," Sarah has already spent hours feeling anxious, rejected, and emotionally alone. From Mark's perspective, the situation makes no sense. He wasn't angry. He wasn't pulling away. He simply needed a little mental space after a long day at work. But from Sarah's perspective, the silence felt deeply personal. Who's right? Ironically, both of them. This is where attachment theory offers one of the most powerful insights in relationship folk: psychology. Our reactions aren't only shaped by what's happening in the present moment. They're also influenced by emotional expectations our brains developed much earlier in life, through repeated experiences with caregivers and important relationships. Researchers have spent decades studying attachment, beginning with the pioneering work of psychologist John Bowlby, and later expanded through Mary Ainsworth's groundbreaking observations. Their research suggested that the emotional bonds we develop early in life help shape the expectations we carry into adult relationships. These aren't permanent labels or life sentences. They're adaptive strategies our minds develop to help us feel emotionally safe. That's an important distinction. Attachment styles aren't personality types. They're not flaws. They're not excuses for unhealthy behavior. They're patterns. Patterns that often operate automatically until we become aware of them. Think of your attachment system like the operating system on your phone. Most days, you don't even notice it's running, but it's quietly controlling how everything functions in the background. In relationships, your attachment system is constantly asking one simple question: am I emotionally safe with this person? When the answer feels like yes, your nervous system relaxes. You become more open, patient, curious, and emotionally available. But when the answer feels uncertain, your brain shifts into protection mode. That's when the invisible trap begins. One partner starts seeking more closeness because distance feels threatening. The other starts seeking more space because emotional intensity feels overwhelming. Neither person intends to hurt the other. In fact, both are trying to feel safe. But their protective strategies accidentally create the very disconnection they fear. It's a painful paradox. The more one partner reaches out, the more pressured the other feels. The more the second partner steps back, the more abandoned the first partner feels. Soon, the relationship isn't centered around love anymore. It's centered around managing fear. What's especially difficult is that both partners usually interpret the other's fear's behavior through their own emotional lens. The person craving reassurance may think, if they really loved me, they'd want to talk. Meanwhile, the partner needing space may think, if they really trusted me, they'd let me breathe. Neither interpretation tells the whole story. Underneath those reactions are two nervous systems trying to solve the same problem in completely different ways. And here's what makes this trap so invisible. Most couples don't argue about attachment. They argue about dishes, text messages, forgotten plans, tone of voice, or who started the last fight. Those everyday disagreements become symbols of something much deeper, a search for emotional security that neither partner fully understands. That's why the same conflict keeps showing up wearing different clothes. The topic changes, but the emotional pattern stays exactly the same. And unless that hidden pattern becomes visible, even the strongest love can slowly become buried beneath misunderstanding, defensiveness, and emotional exhaustion. The hardest part is that these patterns rarely announce themselves. They don't say, "This is your attachment system talking." Instead, they disguise themselves as perfectly reasonable thoughts. "I just wish they cared more. I need a little space. They're too needy. They're emotionally unavailable." At first glance, these statements sound like observations about the other person, but often they're windows into what our own nervous system is experiencing. Imagine another couple, David and Emily. They genuinely enjoy being together. They laugh easily, support each other's goals, and talk about building a future. Yet every few weeks, they find themselves having the exact same argument. Emily notices David seems distracted. She asks if something is wrong. David says, "Nothing." But Emily senses that something feels off, so she asks again. David becomes frustrated because in his mind, he's already answered the question. Emily hears his frustration as emotional distance, so she pushes harder, hoping to reconnect. David feels cornered and withdraws even further. Within minutes, they're no longer talking about what happened that day. They're fighting about why they always end up here. Afterward, both feel misunderstood. Emily thinks, "Why won't he just let me in?" David thinks, "Why is nothing I say ever enough?" Neither of them woke up wanting an argument. Neither planned to hurt the other. Yet their automatic responses created a cycle that neither recognized while they were living through it. Relationship researchers sometimes describe this kind of interaction as a negative cycle. The problem isn't simply one person's behavior. It's the interaction between both people's protective strategies. One reaction unintentionally triggers another until both partners are reacting more to each other's defenses than to each other's true intentions. This is why trying to decide who's right often misses the point. The real question isn't who started it. The more useful question is, what is each person trying to protect? That shift changes everything. The partner asking repeated questions usually isn't trying to control the relationship. They'd often trying to restore a sense of emotional connection because uncertainty feels unsafe. The partner becoming quiet usually isn't trying to reject their partner. They're often trying to reduce emotional pressure because conflict feels overwhelming. Both people are moving toward what feels like safety. Unfortunately, they're moving in opposite directions. One reaches, one retreats. The more each person relies on their instinctive strategy, the more the relationship begins to feel like proof that the other person doesn't too. Over time, these moments accumulate, not because they're dramatic, but because they're repetitive. Small disappointments become emotional memories. The brain is remarkably efficient at recognizing patterns. If enough interactions end with disappointment, your mind starts predicting disappointment before it even happens. You might notice yourself becoming anxious the moment your partner seems quieter than usual. Or you might feel exhausted before an important conversation even begins, because your brain expects conflict. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as expectation shaping perception. Our previous experiences influence what we notice, how we interpret ambiguous situations, and even how we remember conversations afterward. In other words, once insecurity enters the relationship, it can begin filtering reality itself. A delayed text isn't just a delayed text anymore. It's evidence. A tired facial expression isn't just exhaustion. It's interpreted as emotional rejection. A request for alone time isn't simply self-care. It feels like abandonment. What's fascinating is that the exact same behavior can mean completely different things, depending on the emotional context. Imagine your partner says, "I need some time to myself tonight." If you generally feel secure in the relationship, you might think, okay, everyone needs time to recharge. But if your attachment system is already activated, your brain may instantly ask, are they pulling away from me? Did I do something wrong? The words haven't changed. The meaning has. And that's because attachment isn't just about behavior. It's about interpretation. Our brains are constantly trying to predict whether we are emotionally safe, and when uncertainty appears, they often fill in missing information with stories based on past experiences rather than present reality. This doesn't mean your feelings are irrational. Far from it. Feelings are real. They deserve compassion and curiosity. But feelings are not always perfect evidence of what's happening outside of us. Sometimes they're signals about what's happening inside us. That distinction can completely transform the way couples approach conflict. Instead of assuming my partner is trying to hurt me, they begin wondering, could my partner be protecting themselves in a way I don't yet understand? That question doesn't excuse hurtful behavior. Healthy relationships still require accountability. honesty, and respect. But it replaces blame with curiosity. And curiosity is one of the most powerful antidotes to disconnection. Because the moment two people stop seeing each other as enemies and start recognizing that both nervous systems are trying to stay emotionally safe, the conversation changes. Instead of fighting against each other, they begin working together against the cycle itself. And that's where real healing begins. Not with finding the perfect partner, but with finally seeing the invisible pattern that has been quietly standing between two people who never stopped caring about each other. The good news is that attachment patterns are not permanent. One of the biggest misconceptions about attachment theory is that once you identify with a certain attachment style, you're destined to repeat the same relationship struggles forever. But decades of psychological research suggest something much more hopeful. Attachment is shaped by experience, and that means it can also be reshaped by experience. Our brains remain capable of learning new patterns throughout adulthood, especially within relationships that consistently provide emotional safety, trust, and responsiveness. That doesn't mean change happens overnight. In fact, one of the biggest mistakes couples make is expecting immediate transformation. After gaining new insight, they read a book, watch a video like this, recognize themselves in the examples, and assume the problem should disappear. Then, when the same argument happens again a week later, they conclude that nothing has changed. But awareness isn't the finish line. It's the starting point. Think about learning to drive. At first, every movement requires conscious attention. Checking mirrors, adjusting speed, watching traffic, it all feels overwhelming. Eventually, those actions become automatic because your brain creates new pathways through repetition. Relationships work in a surprisingly similar way. When you've spent years responding to uncertainty with anxiety or distance, those reactions become deeply familiar. Your nervous system chooses them before your conscious mind even has a chance to think. That's not because you're broken. It's because your brain has practiced those responses thousands of times. Creating new patterns requires practicing different responses, especially during moments when emotions are running high. Imagine Sarah notices that Mark has become quiet after work. In the past, she might have immediately assumed something was wrong and started asking repeated questions. This time, she pauses long enough to notice what's happening inside herself. She recognizes the tightness in her chest, the racing thoughts, the urge to seek immediate reassurance. Instead of treating those feelings as proof that the relationship is in danger, she reminds herself that uncertainty naturally activates her attachment system. That simple moment of self-awareness creates a small but powerful gap between emotion and reaction. Meanwhile, Mark notices his own instinct to shut down whenever conversations become emotionally intense. Instead of disappearing into silence, he says something surprisingly simple. "I'm feeling overwhelmed right now, but I'm not pulling away from you. I just need 20 minutes to clear my head, and then I'd really like to talk." Notice what changed. His need for space didn't disappear. Her need for connection didn't disappear either. But both partners communicated in ways that reduced uncertainty rather than increasing it. That is emotional security in action. Secure relationships are often misunderstood as relationships without conflict. In reality, every couple experiences misunderstandings, disagreements, stressful seasons, and emotional mistakes. What tends to distinguish healthier relationships isn't the absence of conflict. It's the ability to repair after conflict. Repair might sound ordinary, but psychologically, it's incredibly powerful. A sincere apology, a reassuring touch, a calm explanation after emotions settle, a willingness to listen without becoming defensive. These moments teach the nervous system something new. We can experience conflict without losing the relationship. Over time, those repeated experiences slowly replace old expectations with healthier ones. Instead of expecting abandonment, you begin expecting reconnection. Instead of anticipating criticism, you begin expecting understanding. Instead of fearing vulnerability, you begin experiencing it as a bridge rather than a threat. Of course, this kind of growth doesn't happen through one person's effort alone. Healthy relationships involve mutual responsibility. While we can learn to understand our own attachment patterns, we cannot force another person to become emotionally available, respectful, or willing to grow. That's an important balance to remember. Attachment theory helps explain behavior. It does not excuse harmful behavior. If a relationship involves ongoing manipulation, emotional abuse, intimidation, or repeated violations of trust, understanding attachment should never become a reason to tolerate mistreatment. Compassion and healthy boundaries can exist at the same time. For many people, the most meaningful shift isn't simply learning about attachment styles. It's realizing that their deepest emotional needs are not something to feel ashamed of. Wanting closeness doesn't make you weak. Wanting independence doesn't make you cold. Underneath both desires is the same human longing that every one of us shares. We all want to know that we're safe with the people we love. We all want to believe that our emotions matter. We all hope that when life becomes difficult, someone will stay close enough to understand us instead of walking away. Perhaps that's why the invisible relationship trap is so powerful. It convinces two caring people that they're fighting each other, when in reality they're both fighting fear. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of not being enough, fear of losing someone who matters. But once that hidden cycle becomes visible, something remarkable can happen. You stop asking, "What's wrong with my partner?" You become curious enough to ask, "What is each of us trying to protect?" That single question opens the door to empathy, healthier communication, and deeper emotional connection. It reminds us that love isn't just about finding someone who never triggers our insecurities. It's about building a relationship where both people feel safe enough to understand those insecurities instead of being controlled by them. If today's video helped you see your relationships or even yourself in a new light, let us know in the comments. Have you ever recognized one of these invisible patterns in your own life? Your story might help someone else feel a little less alone. If you found this video valuable, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next deep dive into the psychology of relationships. And if you're from Gozmai, and if you're ready to keep learning how emotional security can transform the way you connect with others, click on the next video on your screen. It might be the next step toward understanding not just your relationships, but yourself.